So for those of you who don't know, my name is Kevin Lindo. I'm the Athlete and Coach Services Coordinator of Pacific Sport Vancouver Island. Pacific Sport, we try and create programs and services for athletes right across the long-term athlete development program. So from kids in camps doing multi-sport right through to the podium, high performers, trying to get as many Canadians on possible, athletes and coaches at nationals, Olympics, and so forth. And one way we do this is via education. And we try to bring in people like Tyler to share their knowledge with the community. And that's one of the pillars of our programming. So a few housekeeping items. If you haven't been with us before, Elevate is a speaker series that we started when COVID first kicked in. So obviously everybody had to pivot, and we adjusted by doing these online speaker series. If you can, just mute your mic just for now. But if you have any questions, feel free to unmute, chip in, or put it in the box, or message us, however you want to do it. We want this to be engaging. We want it to go back and forth if possible. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to try and introduce Tyler. All I'm going to say he's a friend of Pacific Sport, and he's doing some tremendous work in our community and right across the country. He can explain his role and what he does much better than I. But Tyler, welcome to Elevate episode 1 of 2021.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. Thanks, everybody, for joining here tonight. And yeah, that's great. Kevin, maybe if you can help me throughout the way, if anyone has questions, and if I don't see them, raise their hands, or if I can't see them, if you could maybe help unmute their mics or just kind of interrupt me as I'm going along, that's great. If there's any engagement along the way. And also, I would like to kind of get through everything to make sure we can have some discussion at the end, because I think that's going to be, we're going to cover quite a bit of material. So I'd like to have time to really talk about it and discuss it together at the end. I think that would be great. So I'm going to start off by giving you about a little bit of my backstory. My name's Tyler Huston. I'm a nurse. I'm a first responder medic, and I am a high performance coach and the founder of Breath Control Training. Grew up in middle of Canada, grew up in the prairies in Manitoba playing hockey. And the same year we lost our Winnipeg Jets. They moved down to Arizona. As the same year I moved down to play hockey in Phoenix for a few years while I went to high school. Shortly after, eventually found my way to here on Vancouver Island and met an island girl and fell in love, and then also fell in love with the ocean. So that's what really, you can't pay me enough now to move back to either place, maybe for a quick visit, but not that long. So I've been in the medical field for a while now. I've worked all over the hospital and emergency and ortho, surgical. And I've also worked at a couple of rehabilitation centers on the island here for the past 7 years or so. So I've always had a fascination with respiratory. Anything pulmonary, circulatory, that's always been what I've been excited about, what I've been interested in. But it really took being on the island here and that love of the ocean that would introduce me into my next kind of passion that would tie everything together. And that would kind of be where breath control started. And let's see if we can get started. And there we go. Free diving. That's my meditation underwater, if you will. That's my escape. And living here in Nanaimo, you don't have to travel very far to do it. I'm a 2-minute walk from Departure Bay here, and there's just beautiful things to see anywhere you go here on the island. So it was through free diving. And for those of you who don't know free diving, it's not when you jump out of a plane with those wingsuits on. Some people think it is. Free diving is when you're underwater on a breath. It's all under your power. You don't have any scuba equipment. It's completely on your willpower and your breath. So it does take physical conditioning and discipline. It does take relaxation on command, which we're going to get into a little bit later. It takes that inner awareness and mindset control to be able to hang out, you know, in that underwater world as long as possible. So it really was free diving that tied everything together for me, my respiratory training and all my background in the medical field to really see that wormhole, and to open up that wormhole to see the performance benefits that it would unlock, just a human performance. Not only in my own personal life, I found, having more patience with my children at home, and being able to have conversations with my wife, smoother conversations, and also just the effect it really had on my performance in running, playing hockey, and in my freediving especially. So freediving is what started off breath control training. And I'm going to introduce you here to a couple of my different mentors that helped me along the way to what really kicked off my training. So this first gentleman, his name is Stig Severinsen, and he was introduced to me by one of my freediving instructors, actually, from Victoria here. And he's the author of a book called Breatheology. And it was my instructor that just first let me know that book. And I got into it, and I dug into it and found out more about this guy. And he's an amazing dude. He's a 4-time freediving world champion. He is a biologist and a PhD in medicine. And he is the first human being to ever hold his breath for longer than 20 minutes. 20 minutes is a very long time. So as you can imagine, it takes a different level of that mental composure to be able to execute a feat like that. So once Stig had retired from competition, he started doing breath work and doing breath training with military personnel and veterans to help alleviate PTSD. And he discovered and did a lot of work through that link between the breath and the nervous system, that it really can help you to control stress, increase energy, enhance performance, and that's both physically and mentally, as well as alleviate pain. That's a big part of what we can do with the breath work. So one day I was sitting at the nurse's office, and I got a phone call from Stig, and he had called to invite me to train with him in Denmark, where he's from. Out of the blue, I guess he had read a paper that I'd written on how I was facilitating breath control training in rehabilitation centers here on the island for athletes and for military personnel to maintain and also, in most cases, improve physical conditioning and mental fitness after either physical or psychological injury. So I'd never been east of Ontario before, so that was a bit of a big trip for me, but made the decision with my wife at that point in our hot tub plan machine, as we call it, that we're going all in, and this is where our life is going and how I can help people the most and help enhance performance and well-being. So that was it, off to Denmark, and we started training with Stig. So we trained for quite a while, and out of that training, we developed a program together, which is the beginning of breath control training. And that program has now developed into a mandatory component for the Royal Danish Frogmen. So that's Denmark's version of the Navy SEALs. So if you have a look at these guys mean business. They only use trainings and technologies that work. So they can't waste their time on anything that doesn't. So that was one of the first implementations of breath control training. And not only is that training mandatory now for the frogmen, but it's also being put into the Danish Air Force. And now it's starting also to get put into the US Navy SEALs, as well as our own Canadian forces. And different ally forces all across the world are starting to incorporate this with their training. And it's being used for its performance, operational readiness, and resilience building benefits. And also those recovery benefits to recover after the workout or after the training. So while I was overseas, I also spent some time training with Mr. Patrick McCowan. And some of you might have heard of The Oxygen Advantage, which is his book. It's a best-selling book. And Patrick is just an amazing, amazing guy all around. He is Mr. Stats, Mr. Research. So he really helped me put together this program and put together the different research and scientific based program from what breath control training is now. So he was also very intrigued on hearing how breath control training was being implemented for physical and performance and conditioning, but also for mental health rehabilitation and the resilience side of things, the rehabilitation side. So he was monumental in providing that research and for really helping me put together the program that it is now. And a lot of the oxygen advantage that you can read in this book is incorporated throughout the breath control training. So in the last few years that we've been incorporating training into the different rehab centers across the island, across Canada, and into the States now as well, the results that we've seen with hundreds of professional athletes, soldiers, paramilitary personnel, so firefighters, police, ambulance, it's been nothing short of remarkable. BCT has prepared athletes to return to sport or the line of duty sooner and in improved condition from when they left. So breath control training can expedite that recovery process and give athletes who have suffered injury, psychological or physical, their old way of life back. And the key word is non-pharmacologically. That's a big part of what we do through the breath work. We can alleviate pain and restore that functional breathing in order to restore lives non-pharmacologically. So that explains how things got fired up and how we really got started. So that explains how the operational readiness side and the tactical performance side, and as well as the rehabilitation side. So now let's talk about why we're here tonight and where we've gone to now, and the high performance sports end of things and how it's getting used in their national teams and some provincial teams and other professional teams throughout the world. So let's begin by clarifying basically exactly what breath control training is and how it can benefit our performance. So BCT is proven principles, exercises, and techniques to form one unique comprehensive training program to scientifically enhance performance. We use the latest advances in medical science, respiratory physiology, and sports psychology. So breathing, breath work has been around for thousands and thousands of years. We've been doing it forever. But what this program really does is in real time, we explain and show you the science of why it's working, why it's making us faster, why it's making us perform longer, okay? That's the beauty of just tying together what's been around for thousands of years, but just that ability to leverage it and measure it. And that's part of that biofeedback technology that we tie with the trainings to show us in real time what's happening in our bodies. So BCT maximizes sports performance safely, effectively, and in the shortest possible time frame. BCT is based upon three main pillars. First one is the biochemistry and the composition of the blood. So through the program, we'll actually alter and modify and change the biochemistry of an athlete's bloodstream, which is pretty incredible. And I always say that after the first session, their first practice, you should see the benefits and feel a little bit better and just be able to perform a little bit better after the first session. But it takes a full 90 days to 120 days, the life cycle of our red blood cells in our body, to actually take the full benefits out of the program, because after that amount of time, we have a brand new generation of fully conditioned red blood cells able to carry more oxygen and be absorbed into higher concentration. So it really is factored into exactly like our makeup is what we're going through. So the biochemistry, number one, biomechanics is number two. So we look at functional ventilation. Okay, we look at breathing patterns. And that's the first thing we do is I'll assess an athlete and try to assess for dysfunctional breathing patterns, which will restore and go through to make sure we can clear that. And number 3 is that positive psychology. So the ability to create more concentration and focus in your performance. And that involves motivational techniques and different imagery and visualization is incorporated at that point. So let's talk about, we're going to go over the performance benefits, okay? And we're going to get into specifics a little bit later. So I'm just going to read through these very quickly. And as I read through them, if any really stick in your mind, make sure you remember to ask questions along the way or to put it in the chat box. But I'm going to go through this bullet point list real quick, and then we'll get more specifically into them as we kind of get into each area, okay? So just a bullet point list, we're going to improve blood circulation and oxygen delivery to the cells. Can dilate the upper airways, the nose and the airways in the lungs, and actually expand the airways. Significantly reduce exercise-induced asthma, and I know, or bronchoconstriction, and I know there's a couple people in the crowd tonight who are quite interested in that, and that's something that is just a lot more prevalent in sport than we know is going on, is that exercise-induced asthma. This program also is very beneficial, and probably one of the biggest pieces of feedback I receive is how helpful it is for sleep, for focus, concentration, and calm. It's able to reduce acidosis, okay? So reduce the buildup of lactic acid. If there's any boxers out there, I think there is, that we're going to be talking about that one a little bit later as well. It reduces the onset and endurance of breathlessness. It has an effect on posture and spinal stabilization. Functional breathing will facilitate functional movement. So if we have an optimal functional breath, it'll mean less injury by providing that functional movement, which should allow us to enhance our game, enhance our performance. It reduces the risk of injury because of that. It reduces the cost associated with breathing and delays fatigue by just using proper muscles and proper techniques for breathing efficiently and properly. It will increase HRV, and we do a lot of work with our HRV monitoring. And this is something that's come a long ways in a couple of years, as most of you coaches and athletes know, it's kind of the gold standard almost in just measuring that ability to be healthy and that performance level. So this is directly affects your HRV. Improves your aerobic capacity. And some very interesting ones, and we will dive deeper into this. It initiates Epo production, okay? So erythropoietin production and splenic contraction. So it actually is able to quite quickly increase the volume of red blood cells in your body in time for a match or in time for a competition. It stimulates anaerobic glycolysis without the risk of injury. So we can use this as an alternative to HIIT training, okay, with less chance of injury associated with it. It increases our VO2 max and our running economy, and it increases the maximum tolerance to breathlessness. Improves diaphragmatic and respiratory muscle strength, improves muscle injury repair, maintain fitness and conditioning during rest or injury. So this is a really important one. If someone's injured, they have a broken leg, or even if they're bedridden, we're able to provide a full cardiovascular workout to someone who is laying in bed. So that's a big benefit to this program. And we reduce the ventilatory response to hypercapnia and hypoxia. Okay, we're gonna talk more about that, but that's just fancy words for saying high CO2 and low oxygen levels in our body. And something that I'm gonna just throw in right at this point, carbon dioxide, as we've kind of been led to believe our whole lives, is not actually an arch enemy and is not our nemesis. Carbon dioxide is our best friend and allows some incredible adaptations to the body once we're able to leverage that and control it. So that's going through everything. And like I said, we flew through it quite quickly, but we will talk about how different things we can do to incorporate all those benefits and how they come about. So all that sounds miraculous and, you know, but let's talk about the nuts and bolts of the program and kind of what it entails that can provide those outcomes. So let's break it down and explore the science, a little bit of what makes it possible for athletes to achieve those benefits. So this is, and just to get out there, it really does depend on the individual we are working with. We assess breathing patterns on an individual basis. So it could modify slightly from player to player on the same team in the same sport, depending on where they're at, where their baselines are, and just what stage they're at. But we always start with relaxation, focus, concentration, and composure techniques. We talk about functional breathing and how that equates to functional movement. We introduce the biomechanics and get deeper into the science to back that functional breathing up and what's going on in our bodies as we move and what's taking place in the background. We go over intermittent hypercapnic hypoxic training, IHHT, or high altitude simulation training. Okay, you can use those interchangeably. That's something very exciting that we get to do, that we can simulate altitude training right here at sea level in the parking lot and get the same results, if not better results, as someone who, instead of having to travel up to the mountains for months or weeks before an event. So we'll get for a lot deeper into that. And then we look at pre-game, okay? Technique and a whole regime that you can do pre-game just to completely prepare your body, your mind, remove those pre-game jitters before any match or any performance. And that's included is sleep hygiene. So we talk about techniques that we can prepare for bed on the night before a game to make sure we get the deepest rest possible. We look at lung capacity. So we do physical exercises to really increase that lung capacity, flexibility, and respiratory strengthening. Look at injury prevention, rehabilitation, and pain management. We get into breath holds. So we talk about the breath retention and that mammalian dive reflex, or that mammalian dive response that we all have. And through those breath holds, it just really helps us establish that composure. And that's what really helps us actually with that cardiovascular exercise for bedridden patients or injured athletes to help maintain those that conditioning. And then we also, when possible, which is not a lot in these days of COVID, but we like to take the athletes out into the water. So we actually like to get out into the pool and do some training in the actual water itself to really enhance all the rest of those techniques that we go over when we get in the water, and just the sensation and the different effects that happen in the water. It really enhances the whole program when possible. Okay, so we're going to start off with relaxation on command. Okay, this is critical to an athlete's performance. You have to be able to relax. Okay, before anything else, before you're able to breathe properly, you have to be able to learn the skill to relax. So breath control leads athletes down the path to attaining that coveted rock. That's relaxation on command. So just think about that for a moment, how powerful that statement is, relaxation on command. That once an athlete has that ability, the execution that they'll be able to pull off by being able to slow down things in their mind and have the time to respond intelligently rather than react to something emotionally. So this is the holy grail for sports performance. And before attempting any techniques for mental performance, even before beginning any functional breathing, it's imperative that athletes possess the skills to be able to relax fully. So that's what we do. We start off to train athletes into deep relaxation where they're in tune with the nervous system, and that nervous system is balanced, and it really begins to create that psychophysiological link, okay? And at this point, the way to create that link and the way to get to relaxation on command is through the 3 Bs. Okay, so that is the breath, the body, and the brain. That 3B connection. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but it's that 3 Bs equal ROC. That's the easy way to remember it, that relaxation on command. And that kind of brings us to functional breathing. And this is so critical for our athletes, for anyone, really anyone in any place. We understand how critically important it is, the role of nutrition and hydration, right? As an athlete, we know how important that is. As I say hydration, it reminds me to have a sip of water. We know how important that is to athletic performance and our everyday well-being, but I'm here to advocate that breathing is actually our #1 most important source of fuel for the body. All right. As we breathe, we have to breathe optimally every minute of every day to feel our best. Okay. As we breathe, as we bring that air in through processes, that air is transferred into pure, usable energy. All right. So maybe it's due to its perceived simplicity that breathing is overlooked, and why we don't spend in the past a lot of attention to it in sport. But out of 30,000 times a day that we breathe, on average, we're only maybe utilizing maybe 60% of that potential aerobic energy. So that's massive. Just think of that. Every day we wake up and start the day, we're throwing half of our main energy supply directly down the drain. So this is huge. This is how we can take advantage every minute of every day. So how we breathe is how we live, how we feel, and the way we perform. So let's just stop there. Time's not going to allow for us to get too far into the functional breathing and all the different techniques, but I just want to show you a quick rundown of the 3 Bs, what I was talking about there. So let's start off by, let's see. I can't see myself. So Kev, give me a thumbs up if that whiteboard's kind of in the middle of the screen or not.
Maybe just go up a little.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
You can see it there? Okay, beautiful. So the name of the game with every minute of everyday breathing is to breathe like rolling waves, okay? We always want to have round at the top and round at the bottom, smooth rolling wave breathing, okay? So when we lead with our breath, and that's what I teach people to do, is to lead into every scenario, every situation in life. When you go to tie your shoe, when you go to get off the bench, when you go to kick the ball, you're leading with your breath. And when you lead with your breath, there's going to be a second line that's going to follow right behind that first line. Okay. You lead with your breath, your body will follow right behind. It has no choice. This is through respiratory sinus arrhythmia that we are able to control our pulse, control our heartbeat through our controlled breath. Okay, so this is magic here. And with that statement, that with that respiratory sinus arrhythmia, what else happens here is heart rate variability. So with our cadence of breathing, with our timing of our paced breathing, we're able to actually increase our HRV with every breath we take throughout the day. So again, this is huge. And that's starting with the breath, the body follows right behind, and then a third line will come and follow right behind that. Lead with the breath, body follows behind, and then our mind will follow right behind that. Okay, that eliminates any of that neural excitability. And that's where that ability to respond intelligently and execute rather than react comes in. So just leading that with that breath will facilitate the rest of those steps. And that's why it's so important, and why I've repeated myself a few times, every minute of everyday breathing. So this takes that, allows for that 24/7 performance enhancement rather than, you know, the couple hours spent in the gym or on the field training a day or every other day. We can literally be enhancing our performance 24/7. And I say 24/7 because only after a couple weeks, it will begin to take over through your subconscious and through your sleep. And once that happens, the benefits just steamroll. And you wake up with more energy, you heal faster, you recover faster, on and on. Okay, so that's an important part. That's what functional breathing can do. And with an athlete, how we're breathing right now, as you're sitting out there watching me, how you're breathing right now is going to dictate how you're breathing during physical activity, and it's going to dictate how you breathe during your sleep. So let's talk about a little bit how to breathe. Okay, so the BCT program makes adaptations and alters the biochemistry of the blood, as we talked about. We also reset that respiratory center in the brain. So what we do during the initial baseline assessment, the athlete is screened for dysfunctional breathing patterns, and we measure the chemosensitivity to carbon dioxide in the bloodstream. That's a very important and key aspect of this program based off your sensitivity to CO2. So the higher an athlete's sensitivity to CO2 is going to show you, and by those baroreceptors, the faster they're going to arrive at breathlessness or that they will gas out. Because the more of a reaction you have, the more of a desire, the more you need to be breathing caused by CO2, the quicker you're going to gas out, simply put. Okay, so remember that last time that you got to that point of breathlessness, when you got gassed out. Even think about, remember last time you were underwater holding your breath. If it was even a long time ago, if you were swimming in a pool or when you're underwater and you're on your way up, and just before you got to that surface, that feeling of wanting to take a breath, that desire, that thinking you need to breathe now, that desire, that feeling, that urge to breathe probably had absolutely nothing to do with oxygen. Okay, but it has everything to do with carbon dioxide buildup in your body and your ability to tolerate it. So that's what, again, this is a big part of the program, is the CO2 in the body. So let's just take a second. And how are we doing for time? We're doing 3 seconds. Do you want to do a quick test, Kevin?
Sounds good. I've been planning for it all day mentally, so let's do it.
Have you been, setting yourself up, getting in the zone?
Yeah. I haven't breathed all day.
Perfect. We'll be ready to go. So this is an objective measurement that's going to show Kevin's baseline tolerance or his sensitivity to carbon dioxide in the body. And why it's an objective measurement, because it's not based on the thought. It's not when Kevin thinks that he'd like to breathe. It's when he actually is going to experience his first involuntary contraction of either his diaphragm or the breathing muscles in his throat. Okay. So I'll walk you through it, Kev. It's going to be a normal inhale and a normal exhale, and then you're going to pinch at your nose and hold your breath. Okay. And I say normal because most times when we get put on the spot for a test, we all tend to overdo it and put too much into it. So just a regular size inhale, regular exhale. You're going to pinch and hold, and then you're just going to wait, and you're going to feel in your body, physically feel for your body's first distinct signal telling you to breathe. Okay. So what that's going to be, it's going to be your brain sending the signal to either your diaphragm or the breathing muscles in your throat. And every single time I do this with a team or do this with a group, it's split 50-50. Half the people feel it in their diaphragm, half the people feel it in their throat. So to be very clear, this is not a breath holding contest. So I don't want you to turn the color of this guy in the picture here. It's if you have to gasp, that means that you've gone too long. It'll happen long before then. Right. So it's your first distinct signal of getting that urge to breathe in your body. Okay. So I'm going to just get my clock ready here, and I'm going to hold it up to the screen. So if anyone else out there wants to try it at the same time, where we can try to sync this up, and I'll give you a few seconds to kind of get coordinated. Now, so run through it again, normal breath in, normal breath out, pinch and hold, and then you're waiting for that signal. So let's give it a second or two. Everyone's ready. Who's going to take part? So normal breath in, normal exhale, pinch and hold. Begin. So you're doing it on empty lungs. Hoping you can see the clock. And just that first subtle involuntary reaction. Okay, very good. We'll just keep going for a few seconds because I can't see everyone else out there. Okay, we're going to stop there.
What was
okay,
it,
Kev, that was really good. That was about 25 seconds.
25 seconds?
Yes. Nice work.
What does it mean?
And so there really is, there's no good or bad at this point. This is a baseline. I think I told you last time that I've trained gold medal winning Olympians who had a much lower Bolt score or score than that. Okay.
Cool. It makes me happy.
Nice work. And so what we can use by measure this really measures exactly where your sensitivity is at any given time. Yeah, please feel free. Throw in your times into the chat. We got 21 seconds. That's great. So yeah, this is something now that you have your baseline, and now we build off of this. And through the different hypercapnic, hypoxic training that we do, we're going to build this number. And after that, after the time prolongs, after each week, we can put on 1 to 3 seconds onto the score by different techniques, okay? By the different techniques through breath control training. And every second you add on equates to further that you're going to be able to push things on the field before getting gassed out. That's exactly what we measured. This is with your first feeling of breathlessness. So the second that you released your hand from your nose, that is the exact second you would have gassed out on the soccer field. That's what that measures. Okay. So that's good. And we can, if there's any questions about that too, we can go over that at the end. But let's see where we're at. So again, how we can adapt that and some of the training, as it says there, we go through the breathe light to breathe right exercises and a lot of other hypercapnic exercises. But as I mentioned before, that we're only really taking advantage of 60% of that energy supply from breathing. It's not because we're not breathing enough. It's because it's the opposite. We're over breathing. We're over consuming. We're bringing in too much air. And as you're going to find out, that can be very detrimental to our overall performance and our everyday health. So let's have a look at this. And we're going to spend a little bit of time just kind of going through this screen. Okay. And if there's any questions, just let me know. But CO2 buildup is measured in the bloodstream, has the ability to actually absorb through the blood-brain barrier. So that's as we build that score, the BOLT score, I call it, or the body oxygen level test. As we build that, we're actually resetting the breathing center in the brain so it doesn't think it needs to be sucking in that much air all the time and causing these other detriments. So as we go forward, that's what we try to do. And let's look closer now at the biochemistry of light breathing. Okay, so let's go through the list here. And so it reduces breathlessness just by the biochemistry. And we split it up into light, slow, and deep for this one specific technique. For this, and this is a technique, this one. So we want to do this one about half an hour to an hour a day, but it really reduces your breathlessness. as well as your regular breathing and normal ventilation. So we're slowing it all down, we're bringing it down. It'll reduce your respiratory rate, so you're going to be taking a lot less breaths, less negative pressure in the airway during your sleep. So this is really helpful with anyone with any sleep apnea or athletes, which is very common in athletes, especially hockey, football players, rugby players. So with that said, it increases that sleep quality, blood circulation, increases the O2 delivery to the cells, increases your recovery from injury or just from match to match. Higher concentration of nitric oxide. Again, I wish we had 3 hours to talk tonight, Kev, but nitric oxide is such a miracle molecule that is only located and injects air as we breathe in through our nasal cavity. And as we do that, it injects nitric oxide, which in the medical field, nitro is a vasodilator. So breathing through the nose as slowly as possible and as deeply as possible is going to increase our circulation and delivery of oxygen significantly by that vasodilation. Only takes a couple of minutes before you feel the difference, before you start warming up by slowing down that breath and having that nitric oxide expand the airways. And so that is a nitric oxide, but it also gets our CO2 working for us, okay? It gets our carbon dioxide working for us. It works with that nitric oxide, and it affects the soft tissue, the soft muscle around the vessels, which allow the vessels to expand even further. Not only the vessels, it affects the soft tissues around our actual airways. So right in the nasal cavity, right, all the way through the airway, all the way down the back, all the way down into our bronchioles. It expands our airways with that nitric oxide. And the second thing that carbon dioxide does, which again, oh, I skipped back a screen, sorry, is really increases the absorption of oxygen into our cells. So this is huge. So I'll try to just kind of skim by it very quickly though, but it's really important that what it happens as CO2 levels rise in our body, it creates what we call the Bohr effect. And if you want to look more into this or ask questions about it later, it's also called the Oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve. So simply put, as the CO2 rises in our body, the pH comes down. And when the pH comes down, it has a direct effect on our hemoglobin. Our hemoglobin is solely responsible for transporting oxygen around throughout the body, okay? The higher carbon dioxide, lower the pH, that hemoglobin is able to open up all the doors and allow all the oxygen to be released and absorbed into our body. So absorbed into the tissues, into the muscles, into the organs, into our brain. So this is opposite of everything that we've been taught for the most part in sport, that before they drop the ball, before they drop the puck, take that big breath and get ready. Couldn't be further from the truth of being helpful for you. The more air we have in our body at any given time, the stronger that bond is between the hemoglobin and the oxygen. So the more we're breathing through our mouth into our upper chest and the more air we're breathing in, the tighter that bond is, and we can't use any of that oxygen. It just goes around our vessels and never gets absorbed. So that's key, that's clutch to be able to take advantage of that higher CO2 levels in our body. So the bottom thing there, calmer mind and focus and concentration is also improved, okay? Because we're delivering more oxygen to actually our brain cells, and the technique itself takes that concentration to be able to perform it. So if you'll notice, in every category, focus and concentration appears in every category, all right? So that's what's so important to our mental composure and our mental health. So moving from the biochemistry to the cadence, so to the pace of the breathing, as I was talking about with those rolling waves, that's what we talked about, the HRV and that respiratory sinus arrhythmia. That's what allows us to get more air actually absorbed into our alveoli. That's what helps with resilience, by able to control that breath, control those rolling waves, and also helps with focus and concentration. So I'm going to go back to my, my diagram. I'll spare you guys any more of my doodling, but talking about the cadence, the pace of that rolling wave breath, okay? Breathing through the nose, that rolling wave breath. The opposite of that would be mountain range breath, okay? So that would be mouth breathing, anxious breathing, mountain range breath. So if we're leading with a breath that looks like that without any round top transitions at the top and bottom, we're leading with that breath, what's our pulse going to be doing? Right? What's that pressure as we're breathing through our mouth and putting that pressure on our heart is going to cause that pulse to shoot through the roof. When that happens, think how much energy the body needs to keep up with all those different muscles and the cardiac to keep that heart pumping so much faster than it needs to be. So our breath is like that. Our body, our heart is going to respond. Where's our mind going to be? Right? We're not going to be in the zone or able to execute or come up with a strategic plan when our mind is bouncing like that. And here's the scary thing. It takes 1 minute of open mouth breathing, or that mountain range breathing, to cut off 50% of the oxygen supply to your brain. I'm just going to leave that sit with you for a minute and we can come back around to that. Just 1 minute is not a lot of time before that effect takes place by leading with that mountain range breathing. So that's how important cadence is, and to really lead with that rolling wave breath. And the biomechanics, they increase our lung volume, increase the ventilated perfusion of each respiration cycle, increases the uptake of O2, our spinal stabilization, because like I mentioned, functional breathing will dictate or facilitate, functional movement, lymphatic drainage, immune booster. Our heart is our pump for our cardiac system, and our diaphragm is our pump for our lymphatic system. And again, focus and concentration comes along for the ride with every part of this. And so when we put these three together, breathe lightly, breathe slowly, breathe deeply, these are all the benefits that can come from this, just this one technique. So in short here, Dr. Maurice Cottle founded Rhinological Society, says that your nose performs at least 30 different functions, all of which are important supplements to the roles played by your lungs, your heart, and all other organs, okay? So in short, your mouth is for eating and your nose is for breathing, period, okay? So everybody out there, I want to see your mouths start closing as I'm saying this. In and out through the nose as much as possible, okay? That means every minute at rest, as much as absolute possible during training. So high performance athletes should be able to maintain nasal breathing for 80% of their training till they get to the point where they need to flip back to mouth breathing. Do that. And when we talk about actual competition or actual game time, that's not the time to be thinking about breathing, thinking about how you're just going to be playing the sport. So that's not when we focus on it. We focus on it every minute of every day, and during training times when we're training for the sport is where we really focus on breath control training, okay? Mouth breathing actually leads towards respiratory dysfunction, and we're going to talk more about that too. So we're going to get into a few specifics now, beginning with exercise-induced asthma. And again, before I got involved with the performance side of things, I really underestimated how prevalent this is out there. And the more people started coming to me who were experiencing trouble, swimmers especially, because the chlorine really aids towards that and really just adds on top of that. So synchro swimmers or divers. And I know some of the triathletes and biathletes and runners out who are joining here tonight are going to be very interested in how this really, really helps with exercise-induced asthma. So in certain athlete populations, it affects up to half of the athletes. And that's a ridiculously huge number. Exercise triggers bronchoconstriction due to dehydration in the airways. Dehydration, speaking of dehydrated, excuse me, dehydration induces inflammation in the airways. Okay, so screening of the UK Olympic team before Athens Olympics showed prevalence of asthma was double that of regular people. Regular non-athletes, it was double that in athlete population who had that exercise-induced asthma. So let's just explain this right now and why it's so incredibly important to breathe in and out with the nose, okay? When we breathe in through the nose, we're bringing that air in, and if we breathe in through the nose and then breathe out with the mouth, we're robbing that moisture from the nasal cavity, and then we're never returning it back. So if you're breathing in through your nose and out with your mouth, as a lot of runners do, that you're robbing all that moisture from your nose and you're drying out those nasal cavities. First thing that happens is those cavities begin to crack and get dried out. Second thing that happens, once they crack and dry out, inflammation begins. That's what causes exercise-induced asthma, by drying everything out, cracking, and not returning that moisture to where it needs to go back to. So that's why it's so important, especially for runners, well, for anybody, but any endurance runner, to return that moisture to the nasal cavity. So nasal breathing protects against exercise-induced asthma, whereas oral breathing may lead to a reduction in lung functioning altogether. Breathing efficiency. So during an increased depth of breathing, the relative cost of breathing increased exponentially when moving from moderate exercise to heavy and full-on workout, full-on exercise, like maximum workout, maximum output. So just looking at these numbers real quick, when we're at, where we're at here, 3 to 6% total VO2 max during moderate exercise. Heavy exercise takes up about 10% of our overall VO2. So that's our overall energy taken that we need for our whole body from the oxygen in our body. And 10% demand on maximum exercise accounts for between 13 to 15%. So all out workout, all out training in the match, where our respiratory system is using 15% of our overall resources intended for the whole body. Okay, that's a large amount of resources that takes from our legs, from our arms, from our bodies. So when we switch to nasal breathing and we're lightening and we're taking less breaths and we're taking lighter breaths, that significantly reduces how much emphasis, how much we're taking away from that overall VO2 max. Okay, significantly. So breathing efficiently and physically fitness, breathing efficiency and physical fitness are both independent and complementary to each other. While physical fitness doesn't always translate into breathing efficiency, there is no doubt that breathing efficiency is the gateway to attaining that peak physical fitness. So that's an interesting way to look at, kind of make it resonate, sorry, not radiate. So let's look at the effects on running economy now. The amount of energy or oxygen consumed while running, swimming, or cycling at a speed that is less than maximum pace. Typically, the less energy required to operate at a given pace, the better. If your body is able to use oxygen efficiently, it is indicative of a high running economy and a higher VO2 max. So there's a study done that researchers have found that running economy is improved by 6% in groups that have performed reduced breathing during exercise, which just kind of goes hand in hand with common sense. If we're breathing less, we're not going to be using as much energy, and which is going to be that much more economical as we maintain that endurance. So here we're going to start talking about high altitude training simulation. And this is, again, incredibly beneficial for athletes without moving to high altitude somewhere or without needing a special room designed to recreate this, we can do it in any parking lot, in any living room. All right. And this is another name you can call this, is that intermittent hypercapnic hypoxic training. So we do a series of breath holds that go along with this. The breath hold training causes lower blood acidity, so less lactic acid buildup, higher tolerance to anaerobic functioning, decelerated metabolism, and an increase to our hemoglobin, our erythropoietin, and our hematocrit in our bloodstream, which is all extremely beneficial to increasing our overall VO2 max, okay? As well as the mass and volume of our lungs. So this is a very short paragraph that contains a lot of incredible benefits to athletes. For most athletes, after a couple of sessions, we can witness a drop of oxygen saturation below 90%. Okay, and 90%, that's considered severe hypoxic event. Okay, so bringing yourself down that low. I know in the hospital at 90%, that's when we start, the protocol is to start adding oxygen if someone starts dropping below that. So 90% is a level that can be comparative to the effects at training at altitude of 3,000 to 4,000 meters. Okay, 80% is, if we can drop down to 80%, that's about 5,500 meters. So that is right about the level of Mount Kilimanjaro. And we can take you there with breath control training. We bring the mountain to you, and actually we can get you to that level in the parking lot. And the benefits of that are that at altitude, the air is much, much thinner than it is here. So when that air is that much thinner, when athletes go up to train, you immediately begin to, your muscles immediately begin to decondition because that resistance doesn't exist in the air. Okay, your body is able to move a lot more in the air, so that resistance might seem slight, but it has an immediate effect on deconditioning your muscles. So just another benefit to this style of training. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. So reduced lactic acid buildup or acidosis. Breath holding after an exhalation causes a decrease to the concentration of oxygen to trigger increased lactic acid. So even as I had you do that technique, Kev, as you exhaled, your carbon dioxide was building in the background, and it takes that lactic acid to start building, and that's what helps force that pH down. And that's part of what creates that Bohr effect we talked about. But at the same time, that carbon dioxide also increases, leading to increased concentration of hydrogen ions to further acidify the blood. So we're putting positive stress on the body. That's what we're doing with this. Repeated exposure to increased acidosis forces the body to adapt to it, okay? Its ability to buffer that CO2 and that acid in the body increases very quickly, and it's able to tolerate and actually buffer that lactic acid. To neutralize those H ions, the body's buffering capacity improves. Hydrogen ions may accumulate more slowly and allow the athlete to continue to exercise longer or at a higher intensity for a given distance or period. So again, to a lot of different athletes in a lot of different fields, this is incredibly important. Increased hydration. And that's not how you exhale, right? We all know that now. So this is clutch as well, just very straightforward. The mean loss of expired water is 42% less by nasal breathing than by oral expiration. So simply put, by switching to nasal breathing, you're immediately going to retain 42% more hydration. That's huge. Think about for any endurance run or any one of us, for our daily lives, right? Just to maintain and not need to have to worry about maintaining those levels. I mean, that's so important. It's such a key factor. So it's a significant increase in hydration maintenance through nasal breathing. So here we go. We're going to talk about Epo production and erythropoietin. So this is a completely natural, completely safe way that we're able to increase Epo in our bodies. Okay, erythropoietin, and I'll explain what, to some of you might know what it's used for or what it does in our body as a result of decreased blood perfusion. So I'll just break it down. Even when our body senses that we don't have enough oxygen in the body, the kidneys begin to create a hormone that is sent to our bone marrow, and that is where we begin to develop and grow new red blood cells through this Epo hormone that creates that process to start happening. And through these techniques, through breath control training, we can increase that Epo production of 24% in the body, which is a very high and significant number. So it peaks about 3 hours after the final breath hold and is returned to baseline after 2 hours. So the thing to know about erythropoietin, that it takes about 3 days, 72 hours before that you begin to actually produce those red blood cells. Before those red blood cells actually are ready, it takes 3 days. So if you're performing these BCT techniques every second day or every other day, you have a steady supply and a higher volume of red blood cells in your body at any given time. So just think about that effect on your overall VO2 max or your overall exercise conditioning, to have those extra fuel in your body at any moment. And this is very cool. Splenic contractions. Not too long ago, we had no idea what the hell our spleens were for. We always, we were removing them for no reason. More or less, or to break it down, our spleen is our body's blood bank. Okay, it's what stores our very, very high quality red blood cells. The spleen acts as a blood bank. It stores high levels of red blood cells, and that's up to 80% hematocrit. Normally, I think women are 40%, men are 43% hematocrit value in our bloodstream at any given time. So this is almost double the quality of oxygen carrying red blood cells that it stores in our spleen. With every apnea, which is every breath hold we do, the spleen contracts, releasing successive amounts of highly oxygenated cells. So when it senses through the breath hold that we're lacking oxygen in the blood, it will actually, it'll contract. And through the series of exercises that we'll do, we'll get it to contract up to 20% of its original size. So that's how much this high quality hemocratic blood is going to be circulating around in your bloodstream. And research shows that 5 max breath holds, and through the technique we use, enables our spleen to contract by 20%. So results have showed a 6.4 increase in overall hematocrit and a 3.3 increase in overall hemoglobin concentration. And this is the beauty, the benefits of increased oxygen uptake and VO2 max last from 10 minutes to 2 hours. So this is a key component to our pre-game rituals, that we do this, and this is lasting 2 hours after we do it. So throughout the whole length of our match, of our game, maybe some of you biathletes, triathletes, it might not quite get you right to the end, but up to 2 hours, we have a lot higher, high quality, high concentration of that hematocrit in our bloodstream. And let me just hammer this home. Between elite athletes, okay, between high performance athletes, there's a difference of 0.5% of hematocrit. Okay, that's all there is between high performance. With these techniques, we can increase your hematocrit level by 6.4%. That's just incredibly significant number of what you can be doing before every game to give yourself this advantage. okay? Long-term effects. As I mentioned, it takes 72 hours for the EPO to make the new red blood cells, but resting hemoglobin mass is trained breath hold divers, so free divers, was 5% higher than untrained. In addition, breath hold divers showed a larger relative increase to hemoglobin after 3 apneas. So just to break that down, if you're practicing breath holding techniques and breath training techniques, your resting volume of hemoglobin is 5% larger to that of people who aren't practicing. So again, very significant number to look at. And everything we just talked about will have an obvious effect on your VO2 max, right? Affected by the amount of red blood cells, muscle, and how much blood your heart can pump. If your body can deliver more oxygen to your working muscles, you will have a higher VO2 max. So everything we've been discussing for the last half an hour is going to have a dramatic result on your overall VO2 max. And now let's just talk for a minute about the positive psychology, or the flow state that comes with BCT training. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who is the godfather of flow state training, he is the inventor. He coined the term flow state, or being in the zone. And he's still a professor at Brown University, I believe, but he invented the flow state training, or what flow state is. It's a sports psychology, also known as being in the zone, which is a highly focused mental state conducive to productivity and creativity. Flow is defined as a peak state of consciousness where we feel our best and perform our best to achieve excellence and peak performance. And again, this is a big part of the training. We get to closer to the end of the training when we begin to get in to the longer breath holds, the breath retention. Because once you're holding your breath, you realize in a hurry, there's not a lot of other places to look but inside. And that's where framing that exercise, framing that technique really allows you to access that flow state, and that you can carry with you from that technique into your sport with you, or into your everyday life. Flow can be described as when athletes and sports merge together, when preparation, training, and values come together to achieve equanimity in sport. BCT is very effective in training an athlete's mind to activate the state of heightened mental and physical performance easier, stay there longer, and return more frequently. So we're right near the end, only a couple of slides left, but this is one of the more important ones, and we've touched on it all along the way, but that pre-game preparation and how the advantage we can make for our team, for our athletes, by implementing this program before and after each game, but we'll talk about the pre-competition right now. So mindset, meditation, and reduced breathing. So this is what brings the focus, the razor sharp concentration, but also the full feeling of relaxation on command at the same time. All right. Think about what that means. Two very opposite parts coming together in the same feeling. And that's what that breathing light, that hypercapnic training allows you to do, is be fully sharp, be fully focused, but also have your parasympathetic system kicked in at the same time. Okay, that's where peak performance really kicks in. And then number two, we go through a series of high altitude stimulation drills, or IHHT. And through that, we're going to increase that Epo production and get that spleen contracting to result in that higher volume of red blood cells throughout the whole match. So at the end of that, breathing techniques to lower acidosis. So as we're kind of letting that CO2 climb a little bit from the breath holds, we just want to make sure that we dump that CO2 before the match starts. So it just takes a few different breaths before we can dump it and kind of get back to square one. And this is the recipe for giving your athletes that separation from the field to be completely ready and prepared physically, mentally for any match. And this is something you can do before every practice, every game. Program integration. So how the program works. We can integrate this into different existing training programs, practices, and drills. And we do work directly with athletes. So we work one-on-one to form custom training programs. And we already kind of talked about the framework of what that looks like. But we do work one-on-one, but mainly we collaborate with teams and clubs to provide in-depth analysis and supplemental breath training that will integrate seamlessly with your current program. And that's the key. It's not something that's going to change the program you have going right now, but it's just supplemental and fits in with what you have going on. And ideally, how we do it, and in the times we're living in now, it actually is quite beneficial that we can do a majority of this through telehealth, or it's through virtually, like we're doing now through Zoom. So we normally start off with 3 or 4 sessions through the Zoom or through virtually. And then if restrictions are able to go through, we can do the on-site, if that's at the rink or on the field, and that's where we can actually incorporate the different specific trainings into the drills you're already running. So that's a really just kind of the last stage to really fitting it in. So we spend a half a day or even a few hours just integrating it into your current program. And yeah, that's when in person we get to bring with us and do a lot more of that biometrics. And we bring a lot of the HRV monitors and the pulse oximeters, and we can really get a good number on setting up a baseline and ability to track that performance as the athletes go through season. So real quick summary here is kind of a final slide. Right from the beginning, hypercapnic training based on functional breathing and nasal breathing all the time, as much as humanly possible. That's what we're shooting for. These are all the benefits. We've already talked about all of them, so I won't go too much into this right now. We're right about time right now. So just have a quick look at that, and you're going to get a copy. Kevin said we're going to send it out so you can spend time kind of going over this graph and just looking at all the benefits and how we achieve each benefit through the breathe light, for recovery, and through that altitude simulation training. So that's the end of the slides and the end of my part here. So I just want to thank everybody for joining us tonight and for being a part of this. And if you have any questions, we're going to have a little bit of time for questions now, but any thoughts, if you want to get a hold of me, you can get a hold of me through my website, breathcontrol.ca. But yeah, thank you very much for joining. And let's open it up now for maybe a few questions. Kev, is that all right?
Yeah, certainly. Has anybody got any questions out there off the get-go? I think it was, it's amazing, all the benefits, and all the benefits we're not tapping into, Tyler. So I have a ton of questions. So I could probably talk all night to you about it, because I'm a bit of a sports geek. I was trying to find the percentage and what's going on in the world of improvement when it comes to performance. But I'd really love to hear from the listeners. So we have a question there from Jonathan. Thanks, Jonathan. With the Bolt test that we did earlier, does it matter where one feels a sensation to breathe, throat or diaphragm? Does it matter?
It does not matter. You might feel it in one, you might feel it in the other, or you might feel it in both at the same time. But really, which one, it doesn't matter. And to really, if you're not sure where you're feeling it, practice in front of the mirror. Take your shirt off and practice standing in front of the mirror, and being an objective, you'll actually be able to see that muscle contract. So you can even use your camera and just on your computer when you make sure no one else is on the other side, but just to help see and you can pay attention, and you'll see your throat actually rise. You'll see those muscles, or you'll see that diaphragm actually jump. So it's a good way to really fine tune it. And the most ideal time, the most accurate time to check that score is first thing in the morning. So as soon as you wake up, but your body's done metabolizing from the night before, you're done digesting, you're not up and your pulse is still low, you haven't had any coffee or anything yet. So that's the most accurate time to check it, first thing in the morning.
So you mentioned, Tyler, that, you know, when we do get our VO2 max and we are feeling gassed and we tend to default to open mouth. You know, I always look at, you know, you watch a boxer or an MMA fighter who's on the wrong end of a beatdown in the fifth, sixth, seventh round, and they've got the mouth hanging open. Why do we default to that? And what are the, is there any way of getting away from that?
That's what this is all about. The second, and it's just a really big part of it is just understanding the science behind it, because it's really a 180 from everything we've been taught our entire lives. We're not, by bringing in that more air, we're not doing ourselves any favor. Less is more. And so when we realize the science that by keeping that mouth shut and by slowing that breath down and bringing it down deeply with our nose, we're actually delivering way more oxygen to our muscles where we can use it. So we're increasing the delivery and the absorption at the same time. So it's just wrapping around that part of just getting to the point where you get the science and you're just doing it. And I always say it takes about 7 or 8 times when you first start to switch over that you're going to really drop in your performance. You will when you start cutting it back. But after that 7 or 8 times, you're going to be right back to where you started, and then you slingshot further from there.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, inevitably, we're always going to get to that stage where we need more breaths in it. Is that right, Tyler? Or are you saying that you can always have this state right through your VO2 max?
The more you practice, the further you can take it. The more you expand your muscles to allow for the lung capacity to increase, the more that you can breathe through that nose, the more you can fight it. Like on my, just personally running, I haven't opened my mouth in about 2 years now. On the steepest inclines, I haven't opened my mouth once. First 7 or 8 times, that did not feel great. Yeah. And you will get through that. But you are able to get to that point. And, you know, and that's through practice. But if you're doing like a competitive run, if you get to the point and you're almost at the end, then sure, switch over to that mouth breathing if you want at that point, because it's your normal functional breathing of every minute of every day that's already got your body at optimal as it can be at that point. Does that make sense? Definitely. So high performance athletes, 80% of the time should be able to stay in nasal breathing.
Yeah, we've got some chat now. So Kathleen wants us to demonstrate, if it's possible, between the difference between the light breath versus the deep breath.
Okay.
Feel free to use me as a guinea pig. I'm on a roll right now.
Well, the best thing with this is the definition of deep means the same in breathing. Definition of deep is from the top of something to the bottom of something. That's what a deep breath is. So breathing through your nose, using your diaphragm, your main breathing muscle, to pull that air down as low as you possibly can. Okay. That's diaphragmatic breathing, nasal breathing facilitates diaphragmatic breathing. So bring that air down as deeply as possible. Deep breath, most of us think is, big barrel chest, but that is not a deep breath. A deep breath is through our nose, slowly and deeply. So I am going to use you as a quick guinea pig here, Kevin. And anyone else out there, this is going to really drive it home. I want you to look down at your chest and look at your stomach and take a big haul of air through your mouth. Okay, through your mouth. And now do that one more time. And now through your nose. Do you feel immediately how much lower that air is getting as you switch to your nose? Yeah. Nasal breathing facilitates diaphragmatic breathing. 70% of all the perfusion that takes place in our lungs happens in the lower 30% of the lobes of our lungs. So if we're not breathing through our nose, bringing that air down as deep as we can, we're missing the boat. All right. So athletes out there with their mouths open are never giving themselves that chance.
Susan just wants, Susan, great friend of PacificSport and the speaker series. Thanks for joining us, Susan. You've always got great points. I thought you said that with increased CO2, the acidity decreases.
No, not the acidity goes up, the pH comes down. Mm-hmm. Yeah, acidity is going up and your pH decreases down. It's that acidity that drives it down. And that's one of the factors that really kicks off that Bohr effect. It's the increased pH, but also the increased heat from that CO2 going up.
Does that answer your question, Susan? Great. So I've got a question about flow then. So
yes,
is flow, as what we know it, those people who are lucky enough to be in a flow state, whether it's sport, work, life, is that as what we know it a little bit flawed then, because we're missing out on all these benefits? Can we increase our flow state?
I don't think what you know of it is flawed, because I'm sure that most people have been there and have got there. But through specific training, you can get there a whole lot more often and get deeper into that flow state. So yeah, if you're Tiger Woods draining that putt on the 18th in that pure flow state, or if you're the barista at Drip Coffee Shop down the hill, you can get into flow by training your mind through specific breathing techniques and breath holds, and just understanding again the science of kind of where to be between those theta waves and alpha waves and how that all works. You can get there. You can train and give yourself a blueprint to get there a lot more often.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's just great tidbits of information we can all take on board, and this is just the benefit of so much awareness and information right now. When it gets in the hands of someone like you, Tyler, I think it's great that we can tap into this, and you've articulated it so well. It's so interesting. Like I said, I have a million questions, but I'm sure people don't want to be all night. Advice for swimmers. This is from Sue again. When training and competing, do they breathe through their nose?
No, it's very challenging to breathe through your nose when you're sucking up water into your nose. So that is a great question. Is that Sue with that question again?
Yeah.
So with swimmers, Sue, swimmers tend to be ahead of the game, further ahead than most other athletes, because they're used to holding their breath already. And it's through those breath holds. So as you're holding, every third stroke, you are driving that CO2 up. So you're not breathing with your nose to drive the CO2. You're actually holding your breath to get the same benefits. So yes, swimmers really do tend to be a lot higher in the CO2 in the Bolt score, because they're used to holding their breath. And through holding your breath, you're driving your CO2 up. You're taking advantage of that nitric oxide pooling. So yeah, swimmers already have a step up. But swimmers, every minute that you're not in the pool is when you can be doing the training to make that really elevate the game to where you're at then. And it's just about really building that breath holding so that you're not turning every fifth stroke. Maybe it's every seventh, and then it's every ninth. All right. That's where the real benefits come in for swimmers. Yeah. And breathe through the nose. The mouth is for eating and the nose is for breathing all the rest of the time.
Jonathan has a question. In biathlon, we alternate between periods of high intensity cardiovascular activity and periods of calm relaxed shooting. So this is a great environment for this. Would there be a breathing exercise that would be the best while skiing into the range to make the transition from skiing to shooting?
Getting specific, but definitely. And it just comes from training just the whole way. But as you're closing off the skiing to get into your shooting, you really want to start expanding those exhales and start slowing that breath down as much as possible. The more you actually extend or prolong that exhale, that's what, even at that point, a heightened exertion is going to help your parasympathetic kick in and get your pulse low faster than anything else by extending that exhale and slowing down that breath. That's what's going to get your overall pulse to drop quicker than anything else.
Also, I want to mention, try not to make the mistake I did when we met Tyler, and when I spoke to some other people, and I told you I'd also done a bit of digging on this topic. I tried to incorporate it, and the one thing I got, and I'm guessing everybody's different, is it doesn't feel great at the beginning because it's so different, right? For me, for my opinion, you know, jogging the trails, running the trails, playing soccer, breathing through your nose, so different, almost makes you want to panic. But as I intermittently did it, it started to feel better. But inevitably, you stop doing it because it doesn't feel good. So what could be a message for those people who are hopefully going to attempt some of this and bring it into their program? What could be the message for them who do panic a little bit, or because it doesn't feel too good?
Sure. The biggest part to remember is that you've been breathing the way you've been breathing your entire lives. If it doesn't feel different off the start, then you're probably doing it wrong. There should be a little learning curve because you're flipping this around, okay? Unfortunately, the society that we do live in is a society of dysfunctional breathing, caused from so many different things, caused from one physical injury, maybe a car accident that sticks with you. It could be mental injury, mental health issues. It could be sickness, illness. For most of us, it starts when we get old enough to sit in a chair in school for too long at school age and develop poor posture. Being on screens for too long throughout the day, chronic stress in our high stress society. All these things, all of them contribute towards dysfunctional breathing patterns. So know that we've been carrying that with us our whole lives. And once we begin to shift, it should feel different. It doesn't take long before it starts feeling seamless and better, and you get that daily functional breathing. Only after a couple of weeks, you're going to start, your muscle memory is going to take over, and you'll just be doing it naturally. And after a couple of weeks, that's about when it starts taking over through the subconscious as well, like I mentioned, through your sleep. So you're waking up with more energy, less lethargy, more focus. And that's how it all just ties together, because it's different than what we've been doing our whole lives. So of course, it's not going to overnight change that dramatically, but it really doesn't take long. And every step you take, every blade you take, whatever you're doing, every ounce that you put into this, you will get 2 ounces out of it.
Any kind of tips for people in their day-to-day life to keep on top of it? Like I'm guessing maybe journaling might be handy.
Journaling's good. Do you know what? Let's see if oh yeah, don't laugh at me, but these are some stickers I stole from my kids. So steal some stickers. I don't care if they're My Little Pony or what they are, or if it's duct tape, but take stickers, put one on your cell phone, put one on your computer, put one on your remote control, put one on your steering wheel, put one on your coffee maker. And every time you see that sticker, it's going to remind you to breathe functionally, breathe properly. Okay, so that's one of the biggest things. But anything, because you do have to front end load this, because you're turning the ship from one way to the other. So stickers are a very good part, but also these TheraBands. So I don't know if you have one of these or if you've got these out there, but just wear them. Wear them during your activity if you can, or just wear them around the house, right around where your lower floating ribs are. And that really helps you to feel as you bring that air down low into your belly and you breathe in horizontally. So you want to expand from the ribs outwards. And nothing really does a better job to allow you to feel that 360 breath or that lateral expansion than one of these TheraBands. So just wear it around the house and you look down, you forget you have it on. You're like, oh yeah, I need to be breathing properly. So when you take it off, hang it over the doorway somewhere where you're going to run into it. It's just these little things that just front end loading this program. Any little trick you can do will help.
Nice. I thought you were going to say put the sticker over the mouth. That my wife would probably prefer that, actually.
Well, that comes later in the program.
Yeah. Wow, great tips. We're at the 90-minute mark now, so we've gone over, which is great. Any more questions? How do you recommend starting this technique while running? Use only your nose for a minute and then mouth for a couple? Like how would you recommend it for Larissa?
So Larissa, that's a really good question. And what I recommend when you're starting off running, don't sacrifice your form. That's key. So if you're not able to keep your speed of your form, you just, while breathing through your nose, just slow it down. So you're probably going to slow your pace down quite significantly off the bat, but so slow down so you can still maintain your good form. And it doesn't take long for the biochemistry to start taking, your vessels are dilating, airways are dilating. It really doesn't take long before that starts picking up and picking up. So most important, don't sacrifice your form. Instead of pushing through it and, you know, making it really uncomfortable and hurting yourself for that first little while, just go a little bit slower than you normally would out of the gates and just grow. Each time you go, you'll be able to a little bit faster. Each time you go, you'll be able to make it, you make it halfway up the hill the one time. Your next time out, you're going to make it 3/4 of the way up the hill. Next time up, you're going to make it maybe to the other side, and then you can even start to slow the breath down when you get to that point. So it really is just slow it down, but don't force the pace to max off the beginning. If that hope that helps, Larissa. Perfect.
Okay, if there's any more questions, Tyler, so there's your website. I'm guessing you're on social media. Can people catch you on there?
Yeah, that's right. Facebook, Instagram, my website, you can send emails through there, but my email is tyler@breathcontrol.ca, or feel free to just reach out and give me a telephone call. Phone number is on the website at 250-667-7722. And even if you're reaching out, we can set up just a 15-minute Zoom functional breathing assessment. So in that assessment, we can go over that Bolt score, and I can just give you a real kind of quick overview of where your breathing patterns are. And I don't charge for that. That's just something we can just do. Like I say, it takes about 15 minutes of time, and it gives you a real good starting point to start with your training.
Fascinating. I think that, what's really beneficial for us locals here on the island is that you're here, Tyler. So I think we've got to tap into that. It's great to just come together and pull on the same direction for athletes and coaches and anybody who's interested in improving their health and activity. So thanks so much for your presentation, Tyler. It was wicked. Well done. And we look forward to seeing you in the next one.
Thank you very much for having me, Kevin. It's always great to see you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for your great questions, and thanks for coming out.
No worries. And regarding Pacific Sport, we're always working on our next Elevate. If you've got any ideas or you think of someone who's a great speaker, please reach out to me. Details are on the website, klindo@pacificsport.com. We've got a brand new program called Coach Academy that will launch in the fall 2021. Again, that's on the website. Really exciting new program. We're trying to take the next generation of coaches to the next level and hopefully into employment. And we're also running camps, obviously with modifications, kids camps, and then all our high performance program as well. So get in touch. We always like to hear from athletes, coaches in the region. And up until then, please check on our Facebook and our website for anything else that we're doing. Other than that, I will say good night to everybody. Thanks for sticking around. And take it easy and have a great week.
So good, Kevin. Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Tyler.
Thanks for your support, Sue.
Always. Bye.